Eastern Time. We're inside the 18.5-minute mark until launch. Again, you're looking at a view of the Soyuz booster, the 2.1A booster on Launch Pad 6, Site 31 at the Baikonur Cosmodrome. The gantry arms were retracted about 20 minutes ago, and the vehicle is on autonomous power at this hour. After careful preparations, the Soyuz was mated to the Soyuz booster. The Soyuz spacecraft itself was mated to the Soyuz booster earlier this week and rolled out to the launch pad, where technicians working in very frigid temperatures hooked up data lines and fuel lines to the rocket for final pre-launch testing. Everything has gone by the book as the Soyuz awaits its liftoff. Again, no crew on board. This will be the ride home for Frank Rubio, Sergei Prokopyev, and Dmitry Petelin later this year. Some of the countdown milestones that will be coming up shortly. At the T-minus 7-minute mark, a launch key will be inserted in the launch bunker, a real key that transitions the launch sequence into its final automatic mode. At the T-minus 5.5-minute mark, there'll be a final check of the range down in Baikonur to make sure that the range is clear, no constraints, and that the Soyuz rocket is ready to begin its journey. Even though there's no crew on board systems will be switched to what is called onboard control, with cockpit displays being activated on board the Soyuz. And again, in place of the typical three-member crew, we have 946 pounds of supplies and logistics for the Expedition 68 crew on board the International Space Station. At about the 3-minute 45-second mark into the count, the fuel lines and other elements of the rocket engines will be purged with nitrogen to fireproof them by removing vapors of fuel and oxidizer. And about 45 seconds after that, the boosters will be pressurized for flight, optimizing the flow of fuel and adding structural support to the rocket. Coming up on the 15.5-minute mark in the count, everything proceeding on track at Site 31 at the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan. It will be a busy time on board the International Space Station with tonight's launch, of course, and the automated docking of this replacement Soyuz vehicle to the station scheduled for Saturday night. A little over 24 hours after that is the scheduled launch of the SpaceX Crew Dragon Endeavour from Launch Pad 39A at the Kennedy Space Center to carry 4 new crew members to the complex, led by Dragon Commander Steve Bowen of NASA, along with Woody Hoburg, Sultan Al Nayati of the United Arab Emirates, and Andrei Fedyaev, Russian cosmonaut from Roscosmos. Temperatures in Baikonur right now, 25 degrees Fahrenheit, very light winds, and mostly clear skies for the beginning of the 2-day trip by the Soyuz vehicle. An automated docking planned for the Soyuz to the Poisk module on the space-facing side of the complex. You can see just to the left side of the Soyuz booster, there are umbilical towers, 2 of them, that are buttressed up against the side of the vehicle. At the T-minus 35-second mark in the count, the first of the 2 umbilicals will retract. The second umbilical will separate or retract from the side of the booster at about the T-minus 15-second mark. That will initiate the engine start for the first stage engines on the Soyuz 2.1A booster. Inside 13 minutes until launch. Everything continues to proceed in flawless fashion in the count. There is actually a 10-second launch window available for Soyuz launches, although the way the countdowns are typically structured, those launches occur right on the dot. And again, launch time this evening, 6:24 and 29 seconds p.m. Central Time. Once the replacement Soyuz docks to the International Space Station, the three crew members who will ride it home, Rubio, Prokopiev, and Petelin, will transfer their Soyuz seatliners. Prokopiev and Petelin will move his Soyuz seatliner from the damaged Soyuz MS-22 over to the new Soyuz MS-23, and Frank Rubio, who temporarily moved his Soyuz seatliner over to the Crew Dragon Endurance, which is docked to the International Space Station, will similarly move his Soyuz seatliner over to the new Soyuz. The International Space Station is currently traveling over the southern tip of South America, about to begin a southwest to northeasterly track. In an orbit inclined 51.6 degrees to either side of the equator, the Soyuz booster, of course, will launch and then arc out to the northeast over the Central Asian desert, heading for its preliminary orbit, with spacecraft separation scheduled 8 minutes and 49 seconds after launch. Coming up on the T-minus 10-minute mark. After the Soyuz vehicle reaches its preliminary orbit, there'll be a series of what are known as DV burns, delta velocity burns, of the Soyuz spacecraft's engine. That will initially raise the orbit of the Soyuz vehicle to match that of the International Space Station, and to slowly, incrementally close the gap between itself and the station, setting up what is called the automated rendezvous sequence on Saturday, leading to the autonomous docking of this vehicle to the Poisk module. Again, docking on Saturday night, scheduled at 7:01 p.m. Central Time, 8:01 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll be on the air live with that coverage as well. Coming up on the 8-minute mark until launch. T-minus 8 minutes and counting. T-minus 7 minutes, 15 seconds until launch. Coming up on the point where the launch key is inserted in the launch bunker, transitioning the launch sequencer into automatic mode. The launch taking place a little more than 2 hours before sunrise on Friday morning in the Central Asian desert. And there's a view inside the descent module, the crew cabin of the Soyuz MS-23. Normally you would see 3 crew members strapped into those seats. And there's a zero-G indicator that will be the ride home for Prokopiev, Petelin, and Rubio later this year. The Soyuz, you can see right above the zero-G indicator, that is cargo, 946 pounds of cargo, replacing the presence of the crew members. T-minus 5 minutes, 30 seconds until launch. The range is clear at Baikonur. Coming up on the 4.5-minute mark until launch. Onboard systems will be switched to what is called onboard control, and recorders are being activated. T-minus 4 minutes and counting. Very smooth countdown so far. The first stage of the booster is being replenished with fuel. That ground propellant feed will be terminated about a minute and a half before launch. T-minus 3 minutes and counting. Just a few seconds away from booster tank pressurization. And the tanks have now been pressurized. Once again, this optimizes the flow of fuel and adds structural support to the rocket as it sits on the pad. T-minus 2 minutes and counting till the launch of the uncrewed Soyuz MS-23. One minute, 30 seconds until launch. The ground propellant feed now being terminated. T-minus 1 minute. Auto sequence start initiated. "35 seconds until launch." There's the retraction of the first umbilical tower. The second umbilical will retract in just a few seconds, initiating the engine sequence start. And engine sequence start has begun. Engine ignition confirmed. The engine's throttling up. Now at full throttle. Turbo pumps at flight speed and liftoff. A new ride back to Earth for Rubio, Prokopiev, and Patelin takes aim on the International Space Station. "20 seconds into the flight, roll program confirmed." Engines reported to be operating normally from the blockhouse at Baikonur. 38 seconds into the flight. The Soyuz arcing out to the northeast. Good structural stability on the vehicle. Pressure in the tanks reported to be nominal. We're coming up on the 1 minute mark into the flight. Passing through maximum dynamic pressure. Flight reported to be going by the book, 1 minute, 20 seconds into the flight. All structural parameters are reported to be normal. The engine's performing as planned. First stage separation is planned about 20 seconds from now. Standing by for first stage separation. And we've had escape tower jettison and first stage separation. The Soyuz traveling 4,500 miles an hour, 29 miles in altitude, 29 miles downrange, coming up on the 2.5-minute mark into the flight. Mark, 2 minutes 30 seconds into the flight, about 6.5 minutes to go. And we've had launch shroud jettison. This view now from a television camera on the upper stage of the Soyuz booster. Coming up on the 3-minute mark into the flight. Less than 6 minutes of powered flight remaining. The rocket reported to be stable. Good second stage performance. Liftoff time was confirmed at 6:24 and 29 seconds p.m. Central Time, 5:24 and 29 seconds a.m. Baikonur time on Friday morning. 3 minutes 40 seconds into the flight. The flight continues to go very smoothly. 5 minutes of powered flight remaining. Four minutes into the flight, the Soyuz traveling 7,400 miles an hour, 81 miles in altitude, 190 miles downrange from the Baikonur Cosmodrome. Roll, pitch, and yaw reported to be normal. Good structural parameters, good engine performance. Coming up on second stage separation. Second stage separation confirmed, third stage engine up and running. 5 minutes, 10 seconds into the flight. 3 minutes and 40 seconds of powered flight remaining. Five and a half minutes into the flight. The Soyuz now traveling just over 10,000 miles an hour, 106 miles in altitude, almost 400 miles downrange from the Baikonur Cosmodrome. 3 minutes of powered flight remaining. All structural parameters continue to perform as planned, as is the third stage engine. Roll, pitch, and yaw, all confirmed to be normal. Good engine performance. Coming up on the 6.5-minute mark into the flight. Less than 2.5 minutes of powered flight remaining. Coming up on 7 minutes into the flight. Mark 7 minutes. 1 minute, 48 seconds of powered flight remaining. Soyuz now traveling some 13,000 miles an hour, 122 miles in altitude. The vehicle reported to be stable. All parameters are good. Engine performance is by the book. Seven minutes, 48 seconds into the flight, 1 minute of powered flight remaining. Eight minutes, 10 seconds into the flight. Once again, good engine performance, good structural stability on the spacecraft. Now 8.5 minutes into the flight, less than 30 seconds until third stage separation. Standing by for third stage shutdown and spacecraft separation. Third stage shutdown and spacecraft separation. Onboard computers now will command the deployment of the appendages, the solar arrays, and you can see them begin to unfurl. Navigational antennas will be deployed as well. And we now have confirmation that all appendages have been deployed, the solar arrays deploying as planned, as are all the navigational antennas. A nominal ascent for the uncrewed Soyuz MS-23. A perfect ride to orbit for the vehicle that will bring home Frank Rubio, Sergei Prokopyev, and Dmitry Petelin later this year. And there's our first view from the external crosshead engineering camera on the Soyuz MS-23. This camera will come into play with all the navigational antenna during the rendezvous, final approach, and docking, the automated docking that this spacecraft will conduct on Saturday night as it links up to the Poisk module on the space-facing side of the International Space Station. So once again, the uncrewed Soyuz MS-23 spacecraft atop the Soyuz 2.1A booster lifted off on time from Site 31 of the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan at 6:24 and 29 seconds p.m. Central Time, which was 5:24 and 29 seconds a.m. Baikonur time on Friday morning. It took just under 9 minutes for the three-stage Soyuz booster to do its job. Everything was perfect all the way up, with spacecraft separation coming at the 8-minute, 49-second mark into the flight, followed seconds later by the deployment of the Soyuz's solar arrays and its navigational antennas. At this point, The Soyuz vehicle will conduct a series of DV, or delta velocity burns, of its engine to raise its orbit to match that of the International Space Station and to close the gap between itself and the outpost, setting up an automated approach and docking to the Poisk module of the International Space Station on Saturday night. So with that, we'll wrap up our coverage with a programming note. We'll be back on the air on Saturday night for rendezvous and docking of the Soyuz MS-23, with our coverage beginning at 6:15 p.m. Central Time, 7:15 p.m. Eastern Time. Docking is scheduled at 7:01 p.m. Central, 8:01 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll see you back here on Saturday night. In the meantime, that wraps up our coverage for this evening. A perfect launch for the MS-23, the new Soyuz, the replacement Soyuz, on its way to the International Space Station. This is Mission Control Houston.